Welcome to this morning's edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest. Very happy to have you guys with us on what figures to be a spectacular, degenerate week and weekend. But get started with the National Football League tomorrow night as you have the Cowboys and the Eagles doing battle. Keep being reminded of that Buddy Miles tune. My mind keeps going through them changes. If Buddy Miles was a degenerate, great drummer and musician, of course, played with Jimi Hendrix and many other bands, had his own band working. If he was a degenerate, the song probably would have been "The Line Keeps Going Through Them Changes," and that line's been moving. I saw it at 7 originally, with the Eagles favored at home against the Cowboys. Of course, the Cowboys then pulled off that stunner with Jerry Jones sending Micah Parsons packing to the Green Bay Packers, who now have seen their lines impacted by that move, although a little bit suspect there, because anytime you hear that a guy's getting a shot in the back, I don't know. I mean, what are we talking here? John Wilkes Booth? It's a little bit suspect as to what kind of impact he's going to have, if at all, week number one for the Green Bay Packers, who are involved in a contest against the Detroit Lions. Marquee game there to start out the National Football League season. We'll see what the Lions are made of without Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson assisting Dan Campbell, or as he's known commonly to a lot of people, Man Campbell. Guy that's right there out of the old Jackie Sherrill school of coaching, where you might even eat a live boar to inspire his team to play well. They had a great regular season. They got Hutchinson back, so many things to consider there. But, yeah, a lot of line changes going on. It's the second week of the college football season, and we have – and it's a week I really don't care for, college football. I really believe this, and I was just talking on another show with some guys, and they say, well, you know what, these teams, I consider it tantamount to the clubbing of SEALs, where all of these heavyweights are playing patsies, complete patsies, and you see these 40-point spreads. And I think it's just utterly disgusting that any athletic director at some school like Troy would go out there and take on the Alabamas of the universe. And some people would justify and say, well, you know what, they get paid $2 million for going in there and taking a beating. It's the old thing that people used to ask when Mike Tyson was in his absolute prime and he was knocking guys out with one shot inside of 30 seconds of every fight as he was coming up the ranks there before he won his first heavyweight championship. And the question was always, well, would you take $1 million to go in there and take one punch from Mike Tyson? And you're asking yourself, well, it sounds awfully tempting. But if you don't survive that one punch, then what's the point? And to have these athletic directors and schools go ahead and take the money to send their players out there to be sacrificial lambs and get creamed. Now, once in a while, you'll see the Appalachian states of the world pull off one of these upsets, and maybe there's been a little bit of a coming together in terms of parity from the lowest level of Division I college football or even Subdivision I to the teams that are ranked at the top. It just seems ridiculous. You had a cupcake game usually to start the schedule. These out-of-conference games were always justified by the notion that, well, you know what, the SEC is so tough, you have to play these games. No, you don't. What's wrong with a team competing for a national championship that has 2 or 3 losses if they played an equivalent level of competition all throughout their schedule? The people that there was a time when it was ink-stained wretches voting on this sort of thing. Guys, big pot bellies and mustard stains on their shirts, like the Onion Man that I used to sit next to when I was covering USC and UCLA football. And you had to go to the LA Coliseum. There was one guy in the corner. They had this big jar of onions, and this guy would put almost the entire jar on his freebie hot dog at halftime, and the whole place reeked. And you're saying, okay, that's the kind of guy that's actually get a little, stain, like I said, on his shirt. That was voting and deciding who would win the national championship. Now you have the college football playoff. It goes 12 deep. But there's still a voting consideration because the panel has to go ahead and whatever factors that they work into the equation, they're not often necessarily judged fairly, as we saw when Florida State got hosed a couple of years ago and didn't get a chance after a 13-0 season because they were going with a backup quarterback who still managed to go out and crush somebody like a grape. But, yeah, I mean, what's the need to play these games? If you're going to play a practice game, maybe just get involved in some kind of formula where you have joint practices before the season gets underway. Change the rules around a little bit, but to see these games that are atrocious where you have these complete mismatches. Here's Clemson coming off their loss to LSU, which a nice crybaby performance there by Dabo Swinney. If you didn't like Dabo Swinney before that press conference, you would be inclined to like him even less afterwards, as he called out his quarterback. Not a big fan of that. I mean, even though these are pros and now they're highly paid pros, and always have been professionals, and payments may have been under the table. Still, it's a kid that you're talking about, or a really young man. Blame yourself for the loss. Even if you believe that the quarterback really fucked things up, blame yourself. Don't call out a kid that's 20 years old or 21 years old and embarrass him like that publicly. But then Dabo took a shot at Brian Kelly, who by the way, I don't know, he lost a lot of weight. Is he shooting Zepbound or Ozempic or something? Lost a lot of weight. He looks pretty good, and I was happy to see Kelly, who I'm not a huge fan of, fire back. As Dabo said, well, our team, our performance, if it was a test, we were in the high 50s, and they maybe had a 65, just barely passing. And Kelly fires back at Dabo Swinney, the Clemson coach, and says, I guess he wasn't watching the second half where we dominated. And of course, it was 14-0 in the second half. And I guess somewhat of an upset. The line on that game was relatively short. And sure enough, that propelled LSU to the number 3 spot in the rankings after week 1 of the college football season. But this week's an atrocity with some of these matchups. Colorado, who lost under Deion Sanders, taking on Delaware. Texas A&M has Utah State. Florida finds itself in an interesting spot with a line of 17.5, and that line's held pretty steadily, as South Florida doesn't appear to be the easy-out patsy that they probably thought they were going to be when the schedule originally was made. So here's Florida with a killer schedule on the season. I mean, if anything's going to hold them back and put Billy Napier again on the proverbial hot seat, it would be the schedule that they have to play in the SEC. They take on one heavyweight after another and all in succession. But whoever put South Florida on the schedule might have overlooked the fact that South Florida is pretty good. They got a freak quarterback who's like the second coming of Dante Culpepper. They handled Boise State, just blew them right off the field. And now getting 17.5, going to the Swamp. Very difficult place to play, no question. But that game among the blowout setup games that are on the schedule, of which it's almost all exclusively this type of matchup, appears to be the one that might have the best chance for an upset. You're not getting 40 points, but 17.5 with South Florida might be pretty appealing. Here's one, speaking of line movements also. Bill Belichick, what an embarrassment. Yesterday, I guess before they played North Carolina and got drubbed by TCU and looked embarrassed after, I mean, even during the game. It was just embarrassing all the way around. And that line originally was 21 points, and now it's down to 12 and a hook. So as we often say, it's good if you get a chance to see one first, especially I think that's going to be especially true in the opening week or two of the National Football League. But we didn't have any indication that, for example, Florida State was going to be able to bounce back from a 2-win season and crush Alabama, who now fell to their lowest ranking in, I think, like the last 20 years or so, as they fell all the way down to number 21 in the poll that just came out yesterday. So a lot of blowouts on the college football slate. It's not all that appealing. I was just having a discussion with a guy about Oklahoma and Michigan. Michigan going on the road to face Oklahoma. I believe that line was 6 in favor of Oklahoma. And Michigan with Bryce Underwood, a highly touted, highly paid recruit that they brought in this year. There was some debate whether he was going to start or not. We knew that was going to be a very moot point, because you're not paying a guy $12 million to come to your school and have him sit on the bench for the first year. He acquitted himself very well. Apparently threw the ball extremely well in the opener that they had, Michigan at home, and they go on the road, and that looked to be pretty much the most appealing of the games that are on the college football schedule in terms of so-called marquee matchups. So we'll see how Underwood does when he has to go on the road. We saw what happened with Arch Manning. A little bit of a freeze job there as Ohio State handled Texas in the season opener, and Ohio State now accorded the number 1 spot in the college football rankings, and probably deservedly so. But a lot of blowouts on the college slate, but the real appeal will be the beginning of the National Football League, and it starts out on Thursday night, tomorrow night, as you have the Eagles and the Cowboys, a division rivalry. They play each other twice every year. Well, we know there's no love lost between any of the teams in that NFC East. and especially Philadelphia. I'm not sure the Philadelphia fans who they despise more. I would think Cowboy fans and the Cowboys, even more so than the New York Giants. Probably a bigger rivalry for the Philadelphians than even their nearby neighbor, the New York Giants. But 8.5 points, that's a lot to lay, isn't it? I know Micah Parsons, if he wasn't, I mean, if you're not talking about a quarterback departing a team or being injured and being out of the game, can a pass rusher be that impactful that we've now seen this line move from 7 to 7.5 and now 8.5? The Eagles having a lay against the Dallas Cowboys. You would have to think that the Eagles are determined to just spank the Cowboys and embarrass them. And nothing gives me more pleasure than seeing the Cowboys lose and lose by a wide margin. My favorite scenario in Cowboy games is watching Jerry Jones in agony up in his executive suite, just with that look of disgust as the Cowboys are being manhandled or doing things that are detrimental to any chance they would have of winning, fumbling the ball, throwing picks, missing tackles, giving up long pass plays. Always love the reaction shot from Jerry Jones, the obligatory, mandatory shot. They go straight up to the booth there, and Jerry's like, "Oh my God!" He looks like Donald Trump at some of these press conferences when somebody asks him a legitimate question. And so, as much as I enjoy that, I don't know that kind of has become a little bit of a prohibitive line. The Eagles are laying 8.5 against the Cowboys. Anytime you get to double digits in the National Football League, in general, I would think that you would be smart to go ahead and take the double digits when it comes to points. There's no other game that has double digits on the slate, and a couple of really interesting tight matchups. As you have the Bills and the Ravens on the Sunday on the opening card, you have the Chiefs going against the Chargers in Brazil on Friday. So a delicious menu. I mean, lots of choices there to pick from, and of course, we still have baseball going on, and all the other activity around the sporting world. But should be a lot of fun. I would recommend this: tread lightly first week of the National Football League, because as we were talking about with our various handicappers here on the show, and anytime you're having a discussion about betting. You got to take it easy at the beginning of the season. The temptation. I say this all the time. It's hard to change your betting habits. I go to the racetrack every time I go. I say, "Well, I'm not going to do my usual thing here." Where I had just recently gone through a spell of 6 straight losing sessions at the track, including 4 days in a row in Las Vegas. Wearing huge losses I was sustaining. I was not exactly sending it in large proportions, but nonetheless, loss after loss after loss after loss. And you wake up every day and you say, "I'm going to do something differently." Instead of playing exactas, I'm going to start betting pick threes, pick fours, pick fives, take a chance at making a big score. And then what do you do when you get there? You go right back to what you were doing to begin with. You chunk in 20% of your bankroll in the first race, betting things that you haven't been able to connect on for a long, long time. So I know habitually very tough to change anything that you've been doing and you're conditioned to do. With parlays and crazy stuff that people do to damage their chances and sabotage their chances of winning. But I would really recommend treading lightly, especially in the early days in the National Football League, and maybe holding back a little bit. Some people say you have to watch the first month before you have a real fix of what's going to happen in the NFL, and you see how teams are either rounding into form or maybe we're completely overrated to begin with. But if you are going to unload on the first week of the season, maybe you really love a game. I don't know that it's that easy to spot any kind of game where the line is totally out of whack. But I would suggest this: just go a little easy in the at the outset of the season, and sort of work your way into it until you can bet with more confidence. Because it's always good to have seen one first. Where we're going to go for our bet today, though, is back to the U.S. Open. I like betting tennis. I think you can find certain spots there, especially in game. Last night we had a situation where I did send it in the third set on Taylor Fritz. Fritz brought up one of the classic lines ever uttered by anybody in terms of sports quotes. And that was the late, great Vitas Gerulaitis, as he had been beaten 17 straight times by Jimmy Connors. And he finally gets a win over Connors. And they asked him at the press conference what he thought about the match. And he said, nobody beats Vitas Gerulaitis 18 times in a row. Now, that was in play last night. 0-10, Taylor Fritz was in matchups with the great Novak Djokovic, who once again, I mean, to be heading for the semifinals of the U.S. Open at 38 years old, and beating Fritz in the fashion that he did last night in a four-set job. I thought after the first two sets that Fritz was coming on, that he had an excellent chance to win the third set. So went ahead, did a little in-game betting, took the advice of my man Mike Jones, breaking once again with my usual habitual, let's just watch this thing, and I've already got my money down. Had a chance to hedge off there. Thought he was going to take the third set, and he did. So got lucky there. Thought he had a good chance to win the fourth set, but wasn't able to do it. And the one characteristic, all of these guys are great. They all hit the ball a ton. They all have big serves. They're great at returning serves. They all have big forehands, backhands, move real well. Fritz has gotten a lot better. There was reason to believe that he was worth a shot there. And I think he might have gone off somewhere between plus 135 and plus 160 against Djokovic. But betting against Djokovic is usually not a favorable proposition. Sure enough, Fritz goes down for the 11th straight time. Djokovic's mental toughness. On break points in the first couple of sets, I think Fritz was 0 for 9. So that's the differential at that level of professional tennis. Who plays the big points well? And it's the slightest of margins. You're talking about centimeters in terms of shots being in or out. And the player's fortunes in a match. Winning the big points is always a Djokovic characteristic. And man, did he come through in that style last night as he knocked off Taylor Fritz. Now heading for him to win the U.S. Open, he would have to knock off, as he did last night, Fritz, and then in succession, is now matched up against Carlos Alcaraz, who's been playing lights out, sensational, great athletic stuff. Hard to imagine Joker getting by him because the opposition's been kind of grinding him down a little bit while Alcaraz has been cruising, having lost 0 sets so far in the U.S. Open. And then, in all likelihood, Sinner goes against Musetti today, and Sinner would find his way into, if he finds his way into the final, if Djokovic is able to get by Alcaraz, he would have to beat Fritz, Alcaraz, and Sinner in succession. If he does that, I don't know. If you don't consider him the greatest of all time already, has the most slams. He surpassed Nadal and Federer some time ago. 38 years old, still playing lights out tennis. He's been to, I think, 53 semifinals and Grand Slams, which is remarkable. And to have won 24 of them, just an amazing career. And still, even though he plays more sparingly than he used to, and seems to always have something bothering him. He's feeling his chest last night and had the problems with his hip and his leg and this and all of this different stuff. But the way that this guy performs under pressure is just absolutely incredible. I don't think he's good enough to beat Alcaraz at this stage, but you never know. You can't count him out because, as he often points to his head, and I guess a lot of other players do, and the capacity of mental toughness, I don't know that there's a better player, maybe in any sport that's ever competed, than the great Novak Djokovic. So congratulations to him. But I did want to look at a match today and probably taking a dumb shot here, but the odds were too tempting to bypass this one. You have Amanda Anisimova. It's a young girl that we saw train here in South Florida many, many years ago. She rose to a very high level of the women's tennis field and then took a break for a while, having, like Naomi Osaka, some mental issues, wanted to deal with her mental health. Took that time off, came back, kind of worked her way back into a position where she was starting to make a rise. But her last performance, she was so razor sharp in her last round, the round of 16 at the U.S. Open, that I have to give her a shot here. Now, she got blown off the court in an embarrassing fashion by Iga Swiatek in the Wimbledon final after playing great all the way up to that point. I think she's probably overcome whatever it was that afflicted her that day. She kind of reminded me of when Canelo Alvarez finally got his shot against Floyd Money Mayweather, and you're asking yourself, why is this guy not throwing any punches? Mayweather, at that stage of his career and at that weight, was not knocking anybody out. He hadn't scored a knockout in like 8 years. And so you had to think that Alvarez in that fight was going to be able to sustain any kind of attack and not be derailed by Mayweather's power, because he didn't have any power at that point. Maybe a great defensive fighter and maybe a little bit slick in terms of being a counterpuncher. But for some reason, Canelo Alvarez, a young guy at the time, maybe he was too young to have faced that kind of challenge and hadn't met that level of competition, even though he'd been fighting in the streets of Tijuana since he was 5. But it's always surprising when somebody uh, plays, that well, or in this case, fights that well leading up to an event, and you think they're in there with a legitimate shot, and then they just freeze, never throw any punches, nothing. Happened to Anisimova in her final at Wimbledon. She gets to the Wimbledon final in spectacular fashion and then does nothing. It just gets wiped off the court. I mean, she literally was embedded in the grass by the end of the third game of the first set and put up no resistance whatsoever. And you thought, what the hell happened to this girl? It almost looked like the fix was in, that Henry Hill got to her and said, listen, I don't know how much money you're going to make from the tournament, but I got way more if you just tank this thing. So I'm thinking that she's overcome that, and you're getting plus 275 with Amanda Anisimova today against Iga Swiatek, who's playing great. She won Wimbledon. She came back, won one of the prelims, ATP 1000 events leading up to this tournament. I think it was Cincinnati, and has been nothing but exceptional so far in all of her matches at the U.S. Open. So no reason to believe that she's going to falter. But after watching a razor-sharp Anisimova in her previous match, getting nearly 3-1 in a matchup that figures to be fairly even, certainly Swiatek, off the Wimbledon performance and in general, deserves to be favored. She's been playing great all year. But I'm going to take a shot today with Amanda Anisimova at plus 275 in the U.S. Open and hope to make enough of a score so we can go out there and bet with a lot of confidence on I'm going to avoid these college football blowouts, but maybe take a little bit of taste on some of the games that are available on the NFL slate. So that's what we're looking at. You also have a baseball card that you can wager on today. So perfect time of the year. It's almost a perfect storm. Not quite, I guess, what you get when you get the NBA moving into action and the NHL, but a full smorgasbord of ways that you can go ahead and entertain yourself wagering on sports today with baseball, U.S. Open, and our play with Anisimova. I hate to think, because I just flashed in front of me a scoreboard with a double bagel and her going down like she did at Wimbledon. But at plus 275, very tempting. This time I've been tempted by the devil here as they dangle this odds carrot in front of me. And I'm thinking this should be much more of an even matchup than it was at Wimbledon. Got to take the price, plus 275, Amanda Anisimova in today's action at the U.S. Open. And then, of course, tomorrow we'll have Mike with us, and we'll go over some of the things in the National Football League, maybe some college football plays. The man has been on fire, red hot, 5-0 on one of our shows that we had last week on the week 1 college football card. And then Friday, we'll get into some college football with the professor. So stick with us, and let's hope the ball bounces in our direction there. Anisimova, plus 275 over Iga Swiatek at the U.S. Open today. You guys have a great day. Enjoy everything that comes your way today. Hopefully, you'll make a big score on that tennis match and some of the other things you wagered on. And we will see you tomorrow with a lot more steam on the pigskin plays that we have for you for the weekend on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.